Good morning, Malcolm. I hope you got your coffee.
I have, yes, it's wonderful. Very good.
Coffee time conversation. Okay, this week's podcast is a sort of follow-up from last week where I sort of went through a little agenda for coming out of lockdown. And having done that, Malcolm and I are just going to kind of try to kick around a few nuances, tuning things up a little bit, perhaps making a few extra comments about this whole thing of bringing your church, hopefully, if the government's roadmap works, hopefully out of lockdown by the end of June, and hopefully doing that smoothly. So just to recap, my 5 little points last week were, as you seek to do this, work through this agenda. First of all, contemplate your congregation. You'll have reluctance, you'll have enthusiasts about getting back and those not so enthusiastic, etc. So that's the first thing. Secondly, consider your approach to how to reopen, and that was basically either in one stage, go for it, or a staged approach, so, just a bit at a time. So that was the choice there, and we tried to say as well there, whatever you do, it's good to listen to folk in the congregation. You've got to bring the congregation with you. Thirdly, communicate clearly what you intend to do, what's happening, when, who's doing what, all those kinds of things, so people are clear about it. Care for the weak was the fourth one. As we say, there will be those who are fragile, and they probably need a personal visit just to encourage them back. And of course, fifthly, commit it all to the Lord in prayer, because we don't want this to go wrong. So that was the kind of overall message. So Malcolm, I just wondered if you had some initial reactions to that. And
yeah. Well, I think it is a tricky one. We're coming out of a lot of time apart and so on. People are going to be feeling some will be very excited. And I think you've got to recognise different people have responded to all this in different ways. The one thing is, your church is your church, and you know it. Don't just be tempted to copy the church down the road, because they might be doing things differently. And a lot of it's to do with personalities and the makeup of the congregation. If you've got lots of young, fit, vibrant people who are full of energy, can't wait to get the live band up on the stage again and so on, and rock and roll. But if it's you might have a church which is more like a hospital ward, with lots of walking wounded or people who are just casualties at all sorts of levels. I mean, aged and infirm, but people who are emotionally quite drained and so on. Some people have lost loved ones and so on. You've got to be really sensitive. And people have got to be encouraged to pastor each other. I think that's the thing. I think one of the things we really must retain is this idea that we are called to serve one another by love. That's absolutely fundamental. The church is a community of loving people, and we cultivate that. So that's important.
Can I just
copy the church? Yeah,
go on. I mean, I just thought your point about not trying to copy other churches, because that church isn't. That's very, very important. And the other thing I wanted to say was, it's probably good to kind of identify the dominant personalities in your congregation and not be afraid of them. You mustn't be kind of dominated by them, just as you mustn't just kind of go with the church down the road, but you mustn't, you must just think this through for yourself. Sorry, you were going to carry on there. Go on.
That's really helpful. That's true. Yep. I think when it comes to the management of it, you remember you're the pastor, and delegate the logistics to other people. Otherwise, you'll try and take on too much. I think the pastor has got to have a clear idea of what they're aiming at, but he's not going to be doing all the grafting of organising the chairs and the social distancing and all. Get somebody else up to do that. Then you can focus on caring for the people and sort of coaxing them back in with personal visits and phone calls and stuff,
Brilliant. That's really helpful. And I think we chatted a little bit beforehand, but just trying to keep the whole process kind of upbeat, light,
friendly.
Friendly. You've got to do that in a personal kind of way. Actually, one of my sons who runs a fellowship group in the church, he was saying that they're beginning to get back, and I think they've had a fellowship group or something in the garden. And he put around something just saying, "Don't worry, I won't be hugging anybody." So
Yeah.
just to kind
Well,
of.
you could set up hug-free zones in the church
There you
for
are.
the nervous.
Well,
So that'd be quite good, isn't it?
well, perhaps that's not as silly as it sounds. I mean,
Yeah,
on
definitely
the other
feel.
hand, of course, you might want to set up, a zone for the enthusiasts, who have got no problems with, putting their arm
Down the
around
end-
somebody's shoulder
down
or
the-
something.
Down the end of the church garden, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, and the main thing is that, we've got to sort of inculcate this whole thing, as you've said, about serving one another and really trying to, go out of our way to help each other, from
I think on the communication stuff as well, try and keep it condensed, because it's very easy to just multiply information, and people are really zapped out with info, and they've just had too much info, particularly people who've been working on Zoom and so on. They're just fed up with it, really. And that's why they want to get back, because they want real life,
Indeed.
I just think the other thing is, I do think caring for the weak and not letting them feel guilty or having let the side down because they're lagging behind a bit, that's important,
Yeah, and I mean, and again, I think I was trying to emphasise that, a personal kind of visit, that might be necessary, for the folk who are, you don't want them to feel as if they're, some of them, they can't help being nervous, it's their disposition, and you don't want to make them feel bad about that.
Absolutely. I think on the last thing about prayer, I think also it's not just the elders and deacons who are doing the praying. I think the whole church has got to be called to pray, not necessarily in one big group, but maybe in small groups or even at fixed times, in anticipation of it, because we've got to get people back looking to God, not just to the structure and the sort of actual programs and so on. People have got to go back thinking, we are going to meet with the Lord.
Yeah,
we're his people in family together, meeting with the Lord. It's important to try and get that back in them. It's so obvious in one sense, but the obvious things get forgotten, don't they?
They do. Malcolm, I think we're going to have to stop there. I think we're beginning to break up. So I think
We're freezing. Whoa. Okay.
Okay.
All right, good to see you, John, anyway.
Good to see you too. God bless. Bye-bye.